What happens when a country that controls 90% of the world's processing for critical minerals decides to cut off exports? The answer isn't just economic disruption, it's a shift in the balance of global power. Last week, China stepped up its ban on exports of gallium and germanium to the United States, striking at the heart of industries that rely on these materials for everything from semiconductors to missile defense systems. So, why is China banning these critical materials, and how will the US recover from this? China's decision to restrict exports of gallium and germanium is more than an inconvenience. It's a strategic power move that exposes the vulnerabilities of US industries. These materials are vital for modern technology, yet the US is heavily dependent on China for its supply. According to a 2023 report by the US Geological Survey, the US imports over 80% of its critical minerals from China, making this ban a direct hit to its industrial and military capabilities. Take semiconductors, the building blocks of modern technology. Gallium is essential for high-performance chips used in everything from smartphones to advanced computing. Without access to these materials, the $550 billion global semiconductor industry faces potential disruption. The Semiconductor Industry Association estimates that even a brief interruption in supply could lead to production slowdowns, increased costs, and technological stagnation. Some analysts argue that the US has enough stockpiles to weather short-term disruptions. However, a 2023 analysis by Bloomberg Intelligence warned that existing reserves are insufficient for long-term needs, particularly as demand for semiconductors and green technologies continues to soar. This ban isn't just a supply chain issue, it's a challenge to the US's ability to maintain technological and military dominance. But what makes these materials so irreplaceable? Please like and subscribe. Your support helps us grow. Thank you. Gallium, germanium, and antimony may not be household names, but they're the backbone of the technologies we rely on every day and the systems that keep nations secure. Gallium. This element is critical for semiconductors used in 5G networks, AI development, and high-frequency radar systems. Without it, the US risks falling behind in the race for technological supremacy. Germanium. A key material for fiber optics, solar panels, and thermal imaging systems. Germanium is indispensable for both civilian and military applications. The US military depends on it for night vision goggles and advanced surveillance technologies. Antimony, used in flame retardants, batteries, and ammunition, antimony is crucial for defense readiness. It's also vital for renewable energy storage, a growing priority for global energy transitions. In 2022, the Pentagon included all three minerals in its list of materials critical to national security. Paul Triolo, a China tech expert at Albright Stonebridge Group, notes, "These aren't just rare, they're irreplaceable for certain technologies. Losing access to them isn't an option." China's dominance in critical minerals is no accident. It's the result of decades of strategic investment. While Western nations outsourced mining and refining due to environmental concerns and labor costs, China embraced these industries, subsidizing operations and scaling up infrastructure. By the 2000s, China wasn't just mining these minerals, it was processing and refining them on a massive scale. A 2023 report by the International Energy Agency, IEA, found that China processes over 90% of the world's gallium and germanium, giving it an unparalleled position in global supply chains. In the 1990s, then-leader Deng Xiaoping famously stated, "The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths." This vision laid the foundation for China's strategy to dominate critical mineral markets, a goal it has pursued relentlessly. Some critics argue that overdependence on mining creates vulnerabilities for China, such as environmental degradation and potential backlash from trade partners. However, Beijing's control of processing capacity offsets these risks by making other nations reliant on its output. China's decision to restrict exports isn't just economic, it's geopolitical. Over the past year, the US has tightened restrictions on China's access to advanced semiconductors, effectively cutting Beijing off from key technologies. This export ban is a direct response, signaling that China can retaliate with equal force. Bonnie Glaser, an Asia expert at the German Marshall Fund, describes the move as economic statecraft at its most strategic. Beijing is showing that it can weaponize resources to counter US pressure. The timing also coincides with growing tensions over Taiwan, a critical flashpoint in US-China relations. By targeting the materials needed for advanced technologies, China is reminding the US that it holds leverage in this escalating rivalry. The short answer is yes. The US semiconductor industry relies heavily on Chinese gallium and germanium. Without a steady supply, production delays and cost increases are inevitable. According to the Semiconductor Industry Association, a sustained disruption could slow US semiconductor production by 30 to 40% over the next decade. The defense industry is equally vulnerable. Companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon use these materials in advanced weapon systems, including radar and missile guidance technologies. A 2023 Pentagon report warned that shortages could impact military readiness and compromise national security. While the US has begun stockpiling critical minerals, these reserves are limited. Efforts to diversify supply chains are underway, but analysts warn that replacing China's capacity will take years. China's export restrictions have prompted nations worldwide to rethink their reliance on Beijing. Countries like Japan, Australia, and Canada are scaling up mining projects, while the European Union's Critical Raw Materials Act aims to reduce dependency by securing 10% of supply domestically by 2030. The Quad Alliance, comprising the US, Japan, India, and Australia, has also prioritized critical mineral independence, announcing new investments in mining and refining during the 2023 Quad Summit. While these efforts are promising, they face significant hurdles. Building processing infrastructure requires billions in investment and years of development, leaving nations dependent on China in the short term. The US has vast reserves of critical minerals, but environmental regulations and bureaucratic processes have created significant roadblocks to accessing them. Laws like the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, require extensive reviews to ensure environmental protection. But these reviews can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years, delaying mining projects critical for economic and national security. For example, the Mountain Pass rare earth mine in California, one of the largest in the US, faced numerous regulatory and legal hurdles before it could begin operations. Despite its potential, much of the mined material is still sent to China for processing due to a lack of domestic refining infrastructure. While these regulations are vital for sustainability, they pose a major challenge to competing with China, which has less stringent environmental oversight. According to Simon Moores, CEO of Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, China's streamlined processes allow it to dominate global refining, while the US is stuck navigating red tape. Striking a balance between environmental protection and national urgency is the key challenge policymakers must address to unlock domestic resources. Critics warn that loosening environmental regulations could lead to devastating ecological consequences, harming communities and ecosystems. However, proponents argue that delays in building supply chain resilience carry even greater risks, including dependence on geopolitical adversaries like China. The impact is already being felt. Rising material costs are translating into higher prices for consumer goods like smartphones, laptops, and electric vehicles. A 2023 McKinsey report estimates that smartphone prices could rise by 10 to 15% within the next year due to gallium and germanium shortages. Similarly, the cost of electric vehicles, which rely on rare earth elements, could increase by thousands of dollars, making them less accessible to average consumers. The renewable energy sector is also at risk. Solar panels and wind turbines, both of which rely on these critical minerals, are expected to see cost surges that could slow the adoption of green technologies. This delay in the clean energy transition could result in higher utility bills for households and businesses alike, further amplifying the economic strain caused by this trade battle. Some experts argue that consumer price increases may be temporary as nations diversify their supply chains and develop substitutes for these materials. However, the short-term pain is unavoidable, particularly as global demand for technology and clean energy continues to grow. Many analysts believe this is only the opening move in a larger economic confrontation between the United States and China. Beijing's control over critical minerals gives it a powerful tool for economic coercion, and the export ban on gallium and germanium could be a test case for broader restrictions. If tensions escalate, China could expand its bans to include other critical materials, such as neodymium and dysprosium, which are essential for electric vehicles and wind turbines. A 2023 report by the International Energy Agency warns that even a temporary disruption in neodymium supplies could delay global EV production by 6 to 12 months and push up costs by 20 to 30%. Such a move would not only harm Western industries, but also reinforce China's dominance in green technology manufacturing. While China's leverage is undeniable, overusing these tactics could backfire by accelerating global efforts to reduce dependence on Beijing. As nations invest in alternative suppliers, China risks losing its near monopoly on critical minerals, potentially weakening its economic influence in the long term. The United States has several strategies to address its reliance on China, but none offer quick solutions. Expanding domestic mining is one option, with projects like the Thacker Pass lithium mine in Nevada showing promise. However, these efforts face significant regulatory and logistical challenges, and developing new mines can take 10 to 15 years. Strengthening international partnerships is another critical avenue. Agreements with Canada, Australia, and Brazil are already underway, aimed at creating reliable supply chains outside of China's influence. The US-Australia Critical Minerals Partnership, launched in 2023, has allocated billions to joint mining and refining projects. Innovation could also play a pivotal role. Researchers are exploring synthetic alternatives and recycling technologies to reduce reliance on newly mined materials. For instance, the Department of Energy is funding projects that extract rare earth elements from coal waste and e-waste, potentially creating a sustainable domestic supply. While these strategies are promising, experts warn that they require substantial time and investment. In the short term, the United States remains heavily dependent on China, leaving it vulnerable to future disruptions. The West's dependence on China for critical minerals is the result of decades of strategic oversight. For years, Western nations prioritized short-term cost savings over long-term supply chain resilience. Outsourcing mining and refining to China was seen as an efficient solution, but it left nations like the United States vulnerable to geopolitical leverage. A 2023 report from the World Bank highlighted that while China was building infrastructure and refining capacity, Western nations were scaling back mining projects and dismantling processing facilities. This complacency has created a significant gap that will take years to close. Some analysts argue that the current crisis could serve as a wake-up call, spurring innovation and collaboration that ultimately strengthen Western supply chains. However, reversing decades of dependency will not happen overnight. Competing with China will require a coordinated, large-scale effort akin to the Manhattan Project. This means massive public and private investment in mining, refining, and recycling infrastructure. The 2023 Inflation Reduction Act allocated significant funding for critical mineral projects, but experts warn that much more is needed to match China's scale. Streamlining regulations is another critical step. Policymakers must find ways to balance environmental protection with the urgency of building resilient supply chains. At the same time, fostering international partnerships and developing synthetic alternatives will be essential to creating a diversified and sustainable supply network. Some skeptics question whether the West has the political will or unity to mount such an effort. However, the growing urgency of the critical minerals crisis may force governments and industries to act decisively. Without a doubt, control over critical minerals is emerging as one of the most significant drivers of geopolitical power in the 21st century. Nations that dominate these supply chains will not only lead in technology and defense, but also shape the future of energy transitions and economic growth. This is more than a trade war. It's a battle for global influence. As the United States and its allies race to secure resources and diversify supply chains, the outcome of this showdown could define the global order for decades to come. This story is bigger than gallium or germanium. It's about control over the resources that power our world: technology, defense, energy, and even the devices we use daily. China's ban isn't just an isolated event, it's a calculated move in a broader contest for global dominance. As nations scramble to reduce their dependency, the decisions made today will shape the economic and geopolitical landscape for decades. But the question remains, can the United States and its allies catch up? Will innovation, collaboration, and investment be enough to counter China's head start? And if this is just the first move, what happens when the stakes get even higher? These are the questions that will define the future. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.